أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we covered the rights of parents, Alhamdulillah, in the last session. In this session, we're going to talk about the obligations and rights of wives and husbands. In today's day and age, let's look at our households, especially within the subcontinent. So, what defines a good wife and a good husband? As parents, when we're looking for a suitable spouse for our children, what do we look at? In terms of a groom, we look at how do they look. Obviously, the looks matter. How much does the person earn? What have they studied? Does he have a good character? And when it comes to Deen, does he pray namaz or does he read the Quran fast? That defines a good person, right? As parents, when we look for a girl, the first thing that always comes to the mind is how does she look, right? If she's a career-minded, if the boy wants a girl who is career-minded, you look at what has she studied, is she interested in working, and so forth. And if not, you're looking at the other side who is looking for more of a stay-at-home bride. Uh, can she do housework? Has she learned any cooking? How's the character? How is she with the elders? Very important. And in terms of religion, does she practice Islam, right? Is she a moderate Muslim or what is she, right? And very interestingly, the hijab defines the religion for a girl. If she is hijabi, it makes her a religious person. If she is non-hijabi, it makes her a modern girl, right? Now that is what we look at in today's day and age, especially in the subcontinent. Now, after marriage, the success of the husband is gauged by his success in his career. He's climbed the ladder of success. They have he's got a chance. He's bought a new house. He's got a nice car. And the litmus test for him is how he is with his parents. If he's the one who listens to the parents, he's an obedient son and he's successful as a son. If he listens to the wife, he basically is, uh, you say, a god case, right? And when it comes to the wife, you have two uh, sides. One is career minded, and the other one is stay at home. So, for a career minded girl, you're looking at the husband and the wife, they both share responsibilities. She's earning equally well as the husband, and they both are planning out their future together. So, about having kids, about having a independent financial life, and so forth. And these kind of people don't like having an interference from the parents, right? They are more independent type of people. Then you have the typical daughter-in-laws that we have in a subcontinent, where she comes into the house and she basically starts to take care of the house as a whole, serving the family, including the in-laws and so forth, right? It's time for the mother-in-law to retire, giving the workload to the daughter-in-law, because when she was young, she went through the same cycle, right? Now, the litmus test for a girl, for a wife in Islam, in these households, is how is she good, how is she as a daughter-in-law, right? Not a wife, a daughter-in-law, right? Is she obedient to the elders in the family? Does she argue with them, or does she simply listen and obey, right? If she listens and obeys, she's an obedient daughter-in-law. If she argues, she is not an obedient, and she is always been told and taught to listen to the elders in the family, right? So now the question that I would like to kind of start off with is, where is the deen? Are we truly following the Quran and the Sunnah when it comes to a marriage? The simple answer is no, because what we are doing is what happens in a culture. Our marriages are more cultural than religious, right? So down the road, when things go astray, there is no one, there is only you to blame. You cannot blame somebody else for your flaws, right? So it's really important to understand, as a Muslim, what are your obligations and your responsibilities and your rights, right? Because marriage is a sunnah. We are supposed to get married, we're supposed to have children, raise them, and so forth, right? But we leave the sunnah part of it when we get married, and we look at the two ayahs in the Quran, the Surah Nisa ayat number 34 and another ayat in Surah Baqarah, I think 228. We look at those two ayats and we basically define the marriage, right? And those two ayats are define what the marriage is. Let's take a step back. Let's understand what are the guidelines, what are the responsibilities of a wife and a husband. And all of this kind of, I have basically designed this session to understand what are the repercussions and what needs to happen for a marriage to be successful, right? So let's start off with that. But before we go into further, there are a few things I would like to highlight. One is, when we talk about rights, we need to understand that rights come with obligations. So you do rights and you have obligations, right? So let's leave our cultural differences aside and let's look at it from the Islamic point of view. Let's look at it from the unbiased perspective. This is not a pick and choose kind of a la carte where you get to pick, oh, I like this right, I'll take that. This obligation doesn't look right to me, I will ignore that, right? It's not like that. You got to take the whole duty and right as a package. You have to understand it as a Muslim woman, as a Muslim man. What is your obligation and what is your right? You got to do both, right? And the last thing that I would like to kind of begin is, keep aside our emotions. Let's think it from the academic perspective and from the deen point of view. So let's begin. So before we dive into the rights, let's look at some simple marriage rights between a husband and a wife. Both man and a woman have the right to refuse and accept the marriage. So, without the approval of the bride or the groom, there is no marriage. In An-Nasai, there's a narration that says our Prophet ﷺ was asked a question. So, what if my father married me off to a man while I disliked this, and my cousin came to ask me for my hand? The Prophet ﷺ responded, there is no marriage to the first man, marry whom you wish. So this very clearly states, and very clear, it gives the clear understanding that without the approval of the girl or the boy, there is no marriage. Number two, scholars have agreed it is permissible to meet your spouses and understand each other before you get married. Obviously, you have to have an adult supervision and you have to maintain the etiquettes of hijab and so forth. It is permissible to put your halal conditions forward. Example, work or study, living with parents or alone, additional marriages for a boy. If he wants to marry more than one wife, he can have that clause in there, and the wife can say, "I'll accept it," or if he decides to marry somebody else, "I would like to get a divorce and move forward." Sharing financial responsibilities. It is very clear in Islam that all the man is responsible for the finances, but if the woman would like to chip in, she is open to do that. It's out of her character. She does that. Again, that's something that you have pre-planned. And to an extent where you can also write down the responsibilities in the house. So cooking, cleaning, and so forth. The meher should be decided by the bride and her guardian with the acknowledgement of the groom. So it is important that the bride and the guardian decide the meher, which is a right on the bride. And we're talking about it has to be there again. There are conditions that are required, so we don't want to go into that discussion in this section. But again, there are some conditions that you have to follow to understand what the meher is. There's a famous narration by between Ali Raziallahu anha and Fatima Raziallahu anha. When Ali wanted to marry Fatima Raziallahu anha, our Prophet wasalam, asked Ali to go and get 400 dirhams as a meher. So Ali Raziallahu anha did not have any property except that he had armor. So our Prophet said, "Go sell the armor in the market, get the money, and then marry a Fatima." So he goes. So Ali Raziallahu anha goes into the market to sell off his armor, and Uthman bin Affan Raziallahu anha comes in and meets Ali and says, "What are you doing here?" So Ali says, "I'm here to sell my armor so I can get money to go and give meher to marry Fatima." So Uthman bin Affan takes out the money and gives him 400 dirhams and buys off the armor from Ali Raziallahu anha, and in return gives it back to him as a gift of marriage. So he takes this money and he goes back to our Prophet ﷺ and hands over the money, and he gets married to Fatima radiallahu anha. So this goes to show that very clear that the bride and the groom so the bride and the bride's guardian uh, are acknowledged the meher, and the groom has to pay that before getting married. If the bride is a virgin, that is her first marriage, then the guardian has the final say. If the bride is not a virgin, that is a second marriage, then she has the final say. Again, the rest is a matter of fiqh and not part of this session. It is then the last piece that I would like to highlight is it is not allowed to change names after marriage. That is imitating the West. On the day of resurrection, it will always be daughter of so and so, son of so and so, not wife of so and so or husband of so and so. There is no blood tie between the husband and the wife, so changing the surname after marriage in Islam is not allowed. Additionally, we do not see that as a practice amongst any of the companions or the mothers of the believers. May Allah be pleased with them. So now let's come into the common right between the two. The right over each other to enjoy and share. Once married, their decisions must be left up to them. There should not be any interference from either sides, especially from the parents. It is narrated when Umar Razilanha was walking by, he heard a Hafsa Razilanha shouting at a Prophet. Wassalam. So he got pretty upset and he walked in and he basically started shouting at Hafsa, saying, "How dare she shouts at the Prophet?" Wassalam. And the Prophet walks away. So he tells, it's a beautiful narration. He tells Hafsa, Listen, you are not Aisha and I'm not Abu Bakr. So we are not in that status with the Prophet. So you cannot be doing what you're doing, right? So, I mean, it's a beautiful way that Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anha, uh, told Hafsa. So again, she does not say anything, and she walks out. He walks out, and he goes meets Salama, radiallahu anha, and he goes and tells her, hey, listen, I'm trying to explain Hafsa that she can't be shouting at the Prophet the way she did. So Salama basically told him that listen, it is between the husband and the wife, and we as wives do shout and argue with a prophet, and he's okay with it. So you do not interfere in this matter. Leave it to the husband and the wife. So that example, that narration clearly shows us that there should not be any interference with third party when it comes to the husband and the wife. They are libas over each other, conceal each other's flaws. Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasullah hunna. They are a clothing for you and you're clothing for them. So hide and conceal your flaws. If you have any flaws between the husband and the wife, that should be hidden because you do not want to go and expose your libas to somebody else, right? The right of confirmation of the lineage of the children. Both the children have, all the children, sorry, have the rights over their, oh, the parents have the rights over their children. Privacy is the right of both spouses that other not discuss their private movements with anyone else. So it's very important that whatever happens between the husband and the wife does not go outside the room. There's a narration. Uh, it's in the it and it's Sahih. Is there any man among so our Prophet ﷺ says, is there any man among you who goes to his wife, closes the door behind them, covers themselves, and conceal themselves by Allah concealing? They said yes. Then he said, then he sits after that with others and says, I did this and I did that. They were silent. He then turned to the women and said, do any of you talk about such and such things? They too were silent. Then a young girl stood up on her toes, so the Prophet ﷺ could see her and hear her, and she said, O Messenger of Allah, they, the men, certainly talk about that, and they, the women, also talk about that. So he, ﷺ, said, do you know what they are like? They are like a female devil who met a male devil in the street, and they satisfied their desires with the people looking on them. Looking on. This is in Abu Dawud, and it's classified as Sahih. So this goes to show how heinous it is to expose or to talk about your private matters in public. Now let's talk about the rights of wife and obligations of the husband. The rights of the wife, number one, husband has to take responsibility and provide support. In Surah Baqarah, ayat number 228, Allah says, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ. Women have rights similar to those of men equally, although men have a degree of responsibility above them. Ibn Kathir Rahimullah says, the spouses have similar rights upon one another, and each must do his or her best, to fulfill the other rights. And in the last sermon of Prophet Muhammad, in his farewell speech, he says, beware of Allah concerning women. You have taken them as a trust from Allah and have made their bodies lawful to you by the word of Allah. You have the right upon them that they know not allow anyone in your house that you dislike. If they do that, you may hit them in a way which does not harm. They must they have a right over you for sustenance and clothing according to what is right. This is in Muslim. And in Surah Al Nisa, ayat number 34, this part of the ayat that says, men are in charge of women because of what Allah has given to some more than others and because they support them from their property. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, what is the right of our wives upon us? He said that he should feed her whenever he eats and clothe her whenever he clothes himself, and that he not hit her face, that he does not call her ugly, and that he not boycott her except within the house. That's in Ibn Majah. So, the number one is being taking responsibility and providing support. This is the right of the wife and an obligation on the husband. Number two, if the husband is not providing as needed, a wife is even allowed to take from her husband's property without his knowledge if he fails because below the basic level of supporting her. There's a narration where Hind bin Udva asked the Prophet ﷺ that Abu Sufyan is stingy and does not spend on her needs. He ﷺ said, take what is sufficient for you and your child according to what is customary. So then again clearly goes to show that it's obligatory on the husband to provide and take responsibility of the wife. Number three, accommodations. An independent accommodation that is a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom where the wife can freely move around. It can be a separate home, an area within your family home, whatever the husband can afford. So, as per majority scholars, including Ghamidi, Israr Ahmed, what they have said, it is preferred that you find a separate accommodation for your wife than your family home because there can always be conflicts. So to avoid the conflicts, keep them separate, and your wife has that right over you. It's a right that she has that she gets her own accommodation. Uh, so that's for the accommodation. Then next comes kind and proper treatment. In Surah Nisa, ayat number 19, we say, and consort your wives in a good manner, for if you dislike them, it may be well that you disliked something which Allah makes a source of abundant good for you. Right? So the best example is our Prophet ﷺ and how he was with his wives. He had the best of treatments when it came to his wives. He had a very soft and nature when it came to his wives. He was playful with them. At the same time, he had his own principles, and obviously, he was the best character of a human. So, it is for us to follow his example and to see what and how he was with his wives. So, kind and proper treatment. And remember, it is a metaphor that says women are made from the ribs of a man. It's a way to say that women are always crooked. So do not try to strengthen them, otherwise they'll break. So it's always for us to understand that that is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them and that's how they're going to be. So it's for us for the men to understand that and give them that right and be kind and uh, caring towards them. The next one is physical relationship. It is narrated that the Prophet ﷺ told Uthman ibn Madhun, as for you, you pray during the night and you fast during the day. Certainly, your wife has a right upon you, and your body has a right upon you. So pray and sleep and fast and break your fast. So your wife has a complete right over you and an obligation for physical. So it's for you to give her the time that she needs. One thing I want to kind of stress is the next point is not to be beaten. There's a word in the Surah Nisa that says Vadribuhunna, right? It has been taken out of context. Basically, that means striking. It is the right of a Muslim wife that she is not to be struck except in the case of an act of defiance against what she must obey. Even in that case, the husband is not allowed to strike her, but in a way which does not harm. There are no narrations where our Prophet ﷺ struck or hit his wives. So it's really important that this word that has been taken out of context, where you're allowed to hit your wives, is not correct, and we cannot be doing that, because if we follow the Sunnah of a Prophet ﷺ, there is no narration that shows that he ever raised his hand on his wives. So it's really important that we stay away from that. Um, and ayat number 34 in Surah Nisa, and this is part of the ayat. And if you sense ill conduct from your women, advise them first. If they persist, do not share their beds. But if they still persist, then discipline them gently. Do, but if they change their ways, do not be unjust to them. So there is a narration where, and again, this is back to the Sirah, where our Prophet ﷺ actually had gave Hafsa Razilanha a revocable divorce. So this was done, and again, we do not know what the reasons were again, but he did divorce her, and Jibril salam came and intervened on behalf of Hafsa and asked him to take her back, because she was, and the reasons that he gave was she was a pious woman and she always fasted, right? So again, that again goes to show that even though he had his problems, he did divorce her, he took her back right away, but again, there is no narration of hitting her in any way. Now, the last part is to be taught her religion. Again, this is the right of the wife and the obligation of the husband to make sure that she understands the religion. All of you are shepherds, and all of you will be asked about your words. This narration is in Bukhari. The ruler is a shepherd, and shall be asked about his words. The man is a shepherd of his family, and will be asked about his word. And the latter part of the narration says, until the man will be asked about the people in his household, did he establish among them the law of Allah, or did he allow it to become lost? Right? So it's an obligatory on the husband and a right of the woman to know her beliefs, to know her obligations, her rights. It's on the husband to make sure she must know her obligation towards him, her rights towards him, her parents, her in laws, her children, and her neighbors, and so forth. I'm paraphrasing another narration that says the Prophet ﷺ said that seeking knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim, male or female. So it's really important that the wife knows her obligations, her rights, and knows Islam. And if she does not, it is up to the husband to make sure she knows that. And I'll explain to you why this is so important down the road as we go into the session later on. Now, rights of the husband and obligations of the wife. Obligations of the wife. Being head of the household. That's the first right of the husband, and the wife is obligated to accept that. In Surah Nisa, ayat number 34, again that's part of the ayat, men are in charge of the women by that which Allah has preferred some of them over others, and by that which they spend from their property. So a pious women are obedient, protecting in absence that which Allah has protected. This is a major responsibility. He has a heavy obligation to lead the family, and the wife should accept this ruling and acknowledge the role of the husband. Shepherd is the head of is in charge of the ward. So in such way, the husband is in charge of the family. There's a narration where Allah's messenger, peace be upon him, cursed manly women. So it's really important that we understand this point. Number two, to be obeyed. So that is a right of the husband and the obligation on the wife to obey him. No obedience is no obedience in what is sinful. Obedience is only in what is right. This is in Bukhari and Muslim. To understand that, when we say obey, there are 2 points to it. One point is obedience does not include anything which goes against disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, if he tells you to not wear a headscarf, that is your right, and he cannot be saying that. In that case, you can disobey him. But, and there's a second point, obedience does not include anything which conflicts with her rights as mentioned above in the previous section, or falls within the boundaries of her duties towards him. So basically, in a nutshell, he's only allowed to he his his obedience only falls within the realm of what is your obligation towards him, right? So whatever you as a wife is obligated to do is what his right his the obedience comes into play. So anything that falls outside that realm is not is falls outside the obedience. So if he goes and tells you, hey, listen, I want you to go and work and give me the money, that's falling outside the obedience. That's falling outside the rights of the wife. So she may not obey that. And so forth, right? Another narration is in I asked the Prophet wasalam, who was the greatest right over a woman. He said, her husband. I said, and who has the greatest right over the man? He said, the mother, right? So, really important to understand what obedience actually means. So, obedience means anything that falls within the realm of the duties of the wife. But again, I would like to stress this point out is that if he, the husband, asks of something of a wife, and even though that may not be his obligation, her responsibility, she does it, that's out of her kindness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always reward her for that. Always happens when you do actions. So when you do action between the husband and wife, that creates a love. So if you are doing things that matter to the husband, automatically the husband starts to love you more and more. So the way that you understand, so it's all about being reciprocal and loving to each other. So I would leave the point of the obeying, and I would stress this to both the husband and wife that when it comes to these kind of points, always be of good character and do what you can within your will, within your capacity to please each other. The next one is physical relationship. It is obligatory on the wife to respond whenever her husband calls her to come to bed, unless there is a strong reason why she cannot. There's a hadith that says, whenever a man calls his wife to his desire, let her come to him, even if she is preoccupied at the oven. It's in Tirmidhi, it's written as Sahih. Another narration is, whenever a man calls his wife to the bed and she refuses to come, the angels curse her until the morning. This is in Bukhari. So it's really important that the wife understands this right over the husband, and she has to obligate and she has to oblige by this. Control over who enters the house. The wife should be aware of who the husband likes or dislikes and should act accordingly. And there's a part of the hadith that says, and that she should not admit anyone to his house except with his permission. This is both in Bukhari and Muslim. So it goes to show that anybody who uh, he disapproves should not enter the house. And again, this is a right of the husband, so he should not be taking this to his advantage, right? Like I said earlier, the obeying part is the right of the husband, and certain parts it could be taken as an advantage. So it's really important that we do not misuse these rights. She not leave the house without his permission. The best place for a woman is in her house. When Allah addressed the wives of the Prophets والسلام, and ordered them to remain primarily in their homes, he associated the desire of women to be out and display themselves with the Jahiliyyah, the age of foolishness. And in Surah Azab, ayat number 33, we have the part that says, "And stay in your homes and do not display yourselves like the ways of the time of ignorance." So it's really important that ideally it is preferred for women to stay inside her house. But if she's working, she may work. But again, the preference is that she stays within the house. And this again comes to a point that I would say stresses: if a man disallows his wife from leaving the house out of fear and honor for her, then he must not let her feel that she is a prisoner in the house and that she was only created to serve him and serve the children. Our Prophet ﷺ would take his wives to war or to different expeditions. He would draw a lot, and whichever wife's name came, and she would basically accompany him in the expedition. Uh, so the exception to this rule is that if the wife of any of you seeks permission to go to the masjid, he may not prevent her. So if she is going to the masjid, then it is preferred that she is allowed to go. You should not be stopping her from that. Now, serving husband and taking care of his house. It's the right of the husband that her wife that his wife takes care of his house to the best of her ability. That includes cooking, cleaning, and other household chores. And it is sunnah that the husband help her in the household chores, as narrated by the hadith of Aisha Radhiyallahu anha. So it is very important that the wife does accept this role, that she serves the husband in taking care of the house. At the same time, the husband also helps her in completing the chores. The next one is one of the most important points that I would like to stress in this session is raising the children. That's a major obligation, responsibility on the wife, and a right of the husband that she does that. Because it is the wife that is at home and is the one that is involved with the children's upbringing. So it is, and as per narrations by many scholars, including Sheikh Albani, Isra Rahmat, Ghamidi, and the current scholars, this is one of the key responsibilities of a wife. And hence, the mother is given that extra uh, level in Islam, right? Because she is the one who upbrings the children, and she's the one who has to make sure the deen is instilled into their lives. There's a, if you look at the lives of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Hanbali, they all had amazing mothers. Um, and it's another very interesting narration is Hassan al Basri, Rahimullah. He was one of the most powerful scholars of the Tabi'in, and he actually grew. His mother's name was Khaira Razilana, and she was a slave servant of Salama Razilana. And as a child, Hassan al Basri lived and did small chores uh, for the household, and he grew up in the environment of and under the guidance of Salama Razil Anha. So, and she herself was a very dignified and a pious woman, and a woman of high religious value. So she is the one who instilled these qualities into Hassan al-Basri, and he was one of the ones that was rated as one of the top scholars of his time. And if you look at the lives of again Imam Malik, the mother was the one who instilled the values in him. Imam Shafi, Imam Hanbali, and all of these big scholars of fiqh had are there because of their mother's uh, continuous uh, focus and desire for the children to be of the highest level of Islamic values. So it's really important that a wife understands this obligation, that her role as a mother comes above a lot of other responsibilities. And that is one of the main things that is lacking in our South Asian culture, that a wife and a woman is too involved with non obligatory tasks which have become obligatory on her, and she tends to ignore the what is obligation on her, right? She's too involved serving or doing things which are not part of her obligations, because that's what the culture has asked her of. So it's really important that we understand that Islamically her obligations fall within the realm of raising the children, and at the end be thankful of his actions, and him be thankful of her actions. There's a narration that the Prophet ﷺ, that I saw most of the inhabitants, that is hellfire, women. So basically, the hadith, paraphrasing it, is doesn't matter how good you do, the husband does for the wife. One small thing that goes against her wish, she tells, "What have you done for me that has been good?" So that is one of the main reasons why women are in hellfire, as per the hadith. So it's really important that the wife always thanks her husband for his actions. Because again, like I said, there's a lot of responsibility, the husband, and the wife has to acknowledge that. The next one is she does not fast voluntarily without his permission. It is not lawful for a woman to fast while her husband is resident except with his permission. So even it comes to voluntary fast, without his permission, she cannot do that. And it's important of and the last one is the importance of fulfilling the husband's rights. When a woman prays her 5 daily prayers, fasts her month, guards her body, and obeys her husband, it is said to her, enter paradise from whichever of its doors you wish. So this has been rated as Sahih by Sheikh Albani. So again, we tend to see both the responsibilities and the obligations of the wife and the husband.